Well, welcome to day 5 of my End of Dragons review series. We're basically a week in now, a working week at least. The expansion came out on the Monday. Here we are at the end of the Friday. Actually, I'm speaking to the microphone on Saturday here. There's no new episode of the Let's Play going up today. I don't want to overdo it and burn out, so today and tomorrow, perfect time for you guys to catch up, and then we'll get in to basically the last moment. So I'll talk about my progress in a second. I just want to be clear, like with the previous videos, this is totally spoiler-free. We're going to be in the thick of some big discussion here, but it is totally spoiler-free. I'm talking about stuff right near the end of the game. Actually, huge chunks of this review are going to be about the final meta, and there's not going to be any footage of that meta whatsoever because of spoilers, which is lame. I can handle it for today just fine. You can be confident this is safe to watch and to listen to, but this one might be the last spoiler-free part, or maybe tomorrow's, but gloves are off soon. So, my progress on day 5, as you can probably guess, took me into the Jade Sea. It took me through a bunch of story, as well as 2 attempts on that final meta, which if you know anything about, you know there is a lot going on there. First of all, though, let's go in order. I opened up at Saitung. As I mentioned in the previous part, the story actually kind of loops you back to previous areas, which I was really enjoying. And then we go back to Saitung. I was hoping for like a good expanded amount of content here too. Turns out it's just like one story instance and then you're off again. The instance itself is fantastic. And considering I'm definitely in the back half of the expansion story right now, you know, I was wondering if it was going to feel like limited in quality and stuff. It really doesn't. It was really, really fun. It was a trick house style thing with lots of puzzling and a good mix of combat, lots of character dialogue that I had a ton of fun with. I am a little bit iffy on some of the characterization and a bit of the story here, but without talking about spoilers, I can't really go into those details. It was a fun mission, but no sooner than I'd finished that, I realized I was going back to the mainland. I chose to spend a bit more time in Kaineng, and funnily enough, as far as day 5 playthrough time is concerned, a huge amount of it was at Kaineng, again. Like, this map just keeps on giving over and over and over again. There were a few map completion objectives that I really wanted to grab. I've now fully map comped both the first and second maps. Now that I have the Springer and I can climb around, I really have a lot more access to things. There are some places on both of these maps, though, that I'm not sure, like, what the intended route of going is. See, if you guys are just running around on your Sky Scales and on Springers with maxed out masteries, and especially with the Living World mastery, the Leap of Faith, the Bond of Faith that allows you to jump off of a mount, your freedom of movement is really high. Like, you can jump off of the top of a really super high Springer jump into a glide, and then Jade bot out of that, and then Sky Scale out of that. You can go really, really far. If you're just an End of Dragons only player, and you're going for that End of Dragons pure thing, not only don't you have any of that extra fancy stuff, even when it's just the Springer can't even jump that high. So I'm getting all these extra like bits of map comp, and some of them are really tricky. That leads me to Kaineng, where I spent a ton of time having a lot of fun, like really trying to figure out what is the route up onto this roof that is super high up in the center of the city, where I can see that there's a mastery point there, or where I can see that there's a point of interest. And I was really surprised. Sometimes, you know, I'd spend forever trying to platform to something and find out there's just like a roadway. It's just in a very different area of the city that will take me there. Or maybe it's a special zip line, or maybe it is really a very layered, intricate jumping puzzle. It really makes me sad knowing that most like veteran players are completely going to miss all that because these other masteries crowd it out. But I had a lot of fun basically doing those climbs. This also led to me getting my last hero challenge. So I now fully have Harbinger. It took me 5 days to fully finish off that last line. I now have my full Condi line if I want to swap my gear again. I had my discussion on that yesterday, so I won't go over it again. But I also have my elite skill now, which was very handy for this meta that's coming up. So it's been nice. I like that the progression spread the whole way through the X-Pack, essentially. Now I'm at that point where I'm getting even more hero challenges, and they're just overflowing to like invalidate the next elite spec that theoretically might come into the game or whatever. But you know, I'm trying not too hard to think about that. Overall, I really liked my progression. It probably will be a bit lame on, you know, when I'm doing my second character, my third character, my fourth, my fifth, and I'll just buy my way into those elite specs with a stockpile, and I'll very much enjoy the quality of life and the freedom at that point. So hey, it's a bit of yin and a little bit of yang. I'll also note that there was a whole section of Kaineng I'd never even been to before. Some of the southern waters I just hadn't unfogged, and that's actually where I got my last hero challenge. I got to look a little bit more at the Naga and so on, which I haven't spent much time with around the past few days. I'll also say I've been getting a bunch of these side quests and achievements. There's popping up and I'm spotting them all over the place. They first picked up in Arborstone, as I said, but really it feels like there is a whole other phase to exploring the expansion I'm going to be playing and enjoying after I've done with the story and that first sort of gloss over the maps. And I don't just mean like fishing everywhere for the insane amounts of fish, but I mean like when I went to Kaineng, I found certain areas that were now under the effect of a substance, let's call it, that the plot had introduced, and now there are achievements to go visit them and see all this creepy stuff, which really, again, I don't really remember anything in the other expansions feeling as cool as this. So for those of us that give a damn about achievements and give a damn about completionism and maybe achievement points, there is a lot to do after the story. Obviously, if you don't care about that stuff, it's a serious problem, and you're not going to get that value out of End of Dragons. But is that an End of Dragons problem, or is that a Guild Wars 2 problem? I think it's just the MMO in general. I can't really saddle End of Dragons itself with those issues. It's the same problem we see in every Living World episode, where if you just beeline the story and miss all the extra achievements, you lose a huge amount of value. We saw the problem in both Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire. Path of Fire especially. Finding solutions for incentive about achievements and whether we should separate some of this stuff as full-on quests, is a discussion maybe for elsewhere. So, lastly, before the Jade Sea, I did get a bit back into the Echovald Forest. I found another huge heart that I hadn't done yet. Really complicated, lots and lots of possibility and things to do, including Jade bot interactions. This actually turned out to be that giant place that was in the pre-release trailers that I guess most of us thought was a jumping puzzle. You know, the big open room with the cranes and stuff. It's not a jumping puzzle, it's a heart area. It's a really involved heart area. I guess I'm a bit disappointed it's not a jumping puzzle, but maybe there's still another one elsewhere. I've actually heard a little through the grapevine and seen sort of some allusions to the discussion online that there's a ton of vast, like, underground vaults and places all over Echovald that I haven't even seen. One of these, like, achievement side quest things told me to go check one of them out as well, so that'll come later. There's a thing going on with Echovald in that the story feels really kind of short. Like, you don't really spend too much time there on your initial visit, then you leave, and I thought I'd spend a good amount of time on my second visit, but they just kind of push you through. So I'm hoping that these side quests fill that out and give me a lot more of that exploration. And I've seen some of it already with that Sylvari in the south of the map. I also saw in Day 5 a Wisp spirit that expanded on Urgo's lore. So Guild Wars 1 players, like basically ArenaNet's first attempt at a full-on raid type experience in Guild Wars, a 12-man long linear mission with a big boss at the end. Urgo's is Warren. It's one of my coolest pieces of lore, I think, for the Echovald Forest that I wanted to see expanded on. And they did! They've explained that there's like twin spirits of the forest. One of them's of growth, one of them's of decay. Urgo's may even still be around. I adored this. Hopefully the devs pick it up further. I think actually that lore about the Sylvari in the south of the map was even cooler, but this was really, really fantastic. So yeah, not much main story in the Echovald. After the mansion instance, you're suddenly dealing with the mobilization of a great many forces, and you can see the end of the tunnel. Now, I've heard from multiple people as this week's gone along that they felt the story does thin out. That's the phrase we've been using, just like in the previous expansions. Just like happened Desolation Fall was in Path of Fire, and after Tarir, basically, in Heart of Thorns. And I really kind of feel like those people who were saying that over the week are right. Now that I'm here at the story, it does feel suddenly very quick and very empty. Granted, the instances in Echovald are really high quality. That strike mission, and there's a moment where you're on a vessel in the high treetops that's really cool too. But I'm kind of feeling that criticism. It's like they've hand-waved that whole bit of the story where we should be dealing with all these people coming together and setting up for the final meta. And they just said, let's just push through that. And I do wonder whether it's because they're out of time or budget or whatever, or because they just didn't really care about that side of the story, because ultimately it's busy work. You know, we've seen Guild Wars' hand-waved that arc before. We saw it get hand-waved, for example, at the end of Season 4. I can kind of understand why they don't prioritize it. And you know what as well? Honestly, I see it in one of Guild Wars' biggest competitors in the MMO space. Final Fantasy XIV, they did the same damn thing at the end of their Stormblood patches. Like, suddenly there's a war on you, and it really comes out very, very quickly. In fact, Final Fantasy does it multiple times. So I don't know. And then there's another thing to think about. The End of Dragon, whether this last bit does get thin, End of Dragons has lasted a lot longer and had a lot more content before it suddenly does that. So maybe this is, rather than a content issue, it's a pacing issue. And overall, I'm happy that I've had an expansion here that is longer than Heart of Thorns and longer than Path of Fire. I haven't even beaten it yet, and I can definitely say that. Another thing I don't want to run into is something I did with POF, which is where I say, oh, look, you might not have got too much in the Echovald, or you might not have got too much here or there, but just wait for Living World Season 6. In Season 6, we'll get all the extra cool stuff. I said that exact same damn thing in Path of Fire about the Desolation, and then what happened? Well, we didn't have a single patch set in or around the Desolation at all in the following 5 years. So I'll hold my tongue this expansion cycle. I'll have more thoughts on the story later. The truth is I still haven't beaten the game. It sounds like the last instances are really, really long and really, really meaty. It's like the end of the entire game's premise, right? Elder Dragon. So I'm taking that as its entire own thing. And we've got like how they're setting up the franchise in the future. Expect the next couple of reviews to be very big on that stuff. And again, that's why the spoiler gloves will probably have to come off fairly soon. I might give you one more that's just general vibe. So, let's talk about the meta. The story took me to the Jade Sea, where there's a big meta, and basically straight away they want you playing it. There are many things I like about this meta, many things I love even, but then there's like a fundamental approach they took with the meta that I don't like at all, and actually baffles me that they went with it. So let's go for this. Let's just talk about the Jade Sea in general. It's gorgeous and it's pretty, but it's a meta map. I don't like that they made it a meta map. Making it a meta map instantly makes the expansion feel comparable in terms of exploration to Heart of Thorns. You get 3 normal things, and then you get a 4th one that feels almost like tacked on. It's got less content because it's based around this meta. And while I don't think that the Jade Sea is anywhere near as bereft of standard content, nor as locked off or as time-gated as the Heart of Thorns Dragon Stand was, right? Jade Sea is not as bad as Dragon Stand, even though they're both meta maps. I do still feel like, because they made the Jade Sea a meta map, we've lost the spirit of it being a full real one. You know, it feels odd to be some arsehole fishing up in some tranquil lake up north while all hell is breaking loose in the south and the dialogue's firing off everywhere. It even feels like leeching because you're taking one of those precious few map slots and not participating with everyone else. Just like if you're on the map, you should be doing the meta. So all the times while the meta is down, you're feeling like rushed. It feels really crappy to be constantly limited on my exploration in that way. Like, say I'm in some of these beautiful tunnels under the Jade. We saw those in the pre-release. They hinted at, I mean, this place is incredible, really cool, but I can't really get into the vibe because I know in just a few seconds or even in just a few minutes or even like 10 minutes, whatever away, there's going to be a meta. So it's like I'm constantly having to schedule where I'm going and what I'm doing, and I can't get like that wide-eyed, chill excitement and enthusiasm to love Tyria like I do in any other map in the game. It feels crappy to feel like I have to be rushing around to get all the dynamic events too, because there's this stacking buff that means I'll do 10% more damage in the later meta, and I might really want that. You know, the system itself I think is cool, don't get me wrong, but it's trampling on the map. And then there are the tangible things that you lose by making a meta map, like the fact there are no hearts on this one. And no hearts means there's no dialogue or other actually interesting non-combat adventuring tasks to dig into. You know, there are some NPCs dotted around and there are things to do and see. It's not as bad as Dragon Stand, but we do lose that. And what if I just want to explore some of those Guild Wars 1 locations here in the Jade Sea, but unfortunately they're actually sealed off because they're meta only. So the only time you'll go there is when there's a big meta thing going on there, and you'll never have that normal exploration experience. Tough luck. And there's no guarantee when you enter the map that the meta is well synchronized with your story progression either. For me, when I first got to the map, the meta was just starting, right? Which you'd think is really good. But I had a bunch of other random story objectives to do first, which are now crowded out, and the meta's overlapping with my story, and it motivated me to play in some really weird ways, and I just kind of felt rushed and odd. I can't imagine how bad it is for players who have just finished running a fun mansion-style instance, and 2 minutes later, load into a meta event map with the meta in full swing, and dialogue screaming about genuinely the most insane story shit ever. It's going to be really rough for them. In fact, I've already seen multiple comments on this review series from you guys confirming that before I even got here. So yeah, I'm complaining. What practical do I have to say? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? I think they should have done this final meta in its own separate space that spins up every hour or so, just like they did with Dragonstorm at the end of the Icebrood Saga. What was wrong with that? That was a lesson learned, wasn't it? I think that there were some downsides to Dragonstorm in terms of how they did it as a format, but it would have been perfect here. It would have allowed the Jade Sea to be its own separate thing. And, you know, the Dragonstorm instance can be mapped on top of the regular Jade Sea map physically, so all the landscape gets to be reused. that would have been fine. Why they didn't do it baffles me. Really, it baffles me. Especially since it's not like that's a lesson they learned 5 years ago and have now forgotten about. It's something they only just implemented, right? The end of the Icebrood Saga. Speaking of lessons they learned 5 years ago and have forgotten about, let's get into the meta itself. Well, first, let's do the good. The meta is awesome. Alright, and I'm going to say this. I don't mean this with any hyperbole. It's definitely the best meta in all of Guild Wars 2. Especially if you're a long-term player and you get the references it's doing. Like, this thing is dripping with callbacks. Iconic music from earlier in the franchise. Like, this one map, this one meta must have the most music variety of anywhere in the game by a long shot. Previous lore coming back, experiences, and even like in the mechanics. Like, those special gliding skills you only had for a brief moment in Bloodstone Fen, and we've been saying for years in the community, oh, we'd like to use these again. They're back here, especially at a certain part in this meta, and it feels so good when it comes up. That vibe you'll feel constantly. Special actions you got in Season 4. And then it's layered with like all the new Countdown stuff in terms of like theme and story beats. So there's really cool new enemy varieties like the salt sprays. That's not really a spoiler to say. We know there were salt sprays in the Jade Sea before. They hold off, but there are salt sprays here. The siege turtle's really good, a big look in on this map as well, which obviously is like the last big mastery of the expansion, and they really big them up and you get to start having those experiences. It's interesting to me that after a whole week of End of Dragons, I haven't done much with the Siege Turtle yet because it's that late in the day. They actually treat the Siege Turtle in End of Dragons a lot like the Sky Scale was treated in Season 4. Like, it's much more of a post-game thing than a regular thing, and I actually think that's quite smart because that's a big captivating thing to keep people playing, even after they beat the core stuff. Even mount skins are being used on various enemies in some of the events where it's appropriate. That makes the thing feel really fresh. So you get 3 lanes. As if you've been watching all my reviews, you'll know all of the metas here are essentially lane metas. Each one is centered around a really cool character. There's an achievement for seeing all the parts of all the lanes. It's basically a different story based on the lane that you pick because the character remarks on different stuff. And I really wanted to hang out with all of them. So even the lane part I think is really good. I don't think it's as mechanically as great as Dragon's Stand was in Heart of Thorns, you know, because that had the lanes too. That map goes on for a really long time and has all the mini branches and so on. But this meta is also not meant to be as long as Dragon's Stand. It's much shorter to complete than that one was. And that's actually a very good thing. You'll see why shortly. So, you know, that's not really a criticism that these lanes are a little bit less detailed. It's because they're just meant to be played through a little bit quicker. Getting out of the lanes, of which I've seen 2. I'll play my 3rd and final one very soon, I think. The back chunk of the meta, the majority, it feels like, when you're doing it, is a single boss fight. I won't give you any spoilers or any hint of what's going on. I will say it's an orgy of amazing visuals. Like, this is so cinematic and incredible. Like, with the weather flying around. They have flying, moving airships like Dragonfall had. You remember the actual physical airship that was sailing in the sky around the map? That mechanic returns, which I was really happy about. Some of you guys were saying that you wished in Kaineng they used that mechanic for, like, some floating barges and stuff. Well, it's here at the end of the final meta, which is cool. And they even have those awesome tornadoes as well, remember? From Season 4? There's one of those, too. So you got all this stuff spinning around, which kind of matches with the geography of the area. The fight itself has split phases that use gliding, special actions that fly you all over the place and are reminiscent of previous patches. And of course, the main boss itself, they do not skimp out on whatsoever. Really intricate, really gorgeous. And don't let me forget to credit the audio and the music. There's this incredible song with this amazing singing. There's an adrenaline I get in this meta that is awesome. The song I think that's playing there is genuinely better than the Morgemoth music, which up till now was my favorite music in combat music in all of Guild Wars. There's a ton of dialogue. And while the dialogue does repeat a little bit based on how the progress of the fight's going, it's got that great new central text telegraph at the center of the screen that helps you to follow it really well, even though you're in some pretty intense combat. Following the story through this fight and weaving the two of them together gives me that same giddy excitement that I had back when Bastion and the Penitent came out, when we were fighting Demos and the story of Saul was unfolding as you progressed through it, and all these things sort of combine. It really is that good. It's fantastic. Talking mechanics, not visuals, they really go all out here as well. I think they have to be a little bit more refined, and it's a little bit trickier because it is a Zerg event, right? With, I think the number is around 60 people. So you can only ask so much of players. You can't ask too much precision is what I mean precisely, because the camera's so zoomed out, because people's frames are going to be so low, the culling settings that people have are going to be so variant and also potentially really bad. So they have to be careful, and I think they do hit the balance in this regard quite well. You know, there are big attacks that with very, very clear orange telegraphs that you know when and how to move out of. The secondary bosses split people into smaller groups, so you feel your impact a little bit more, especially when it comes to break bars. Break bars which are plentiful for what it's worth. There's mechanics about like picking up like little bits of energy around. I already mentioned the spectral actions in terms of visuals throwing you all over the place, but they have a really good role there too. Some of the mechanics are actually interestingly cooperative too. Like one of my favorite things here is a mechanic that involves a player being lifted into the sky, and you have to like save them from getting lifted too far away by damaging the thing that's lifting them, and that breaks their prison and they fall back down. And there's a similar prison mechanic that instead of being done through damage is done through break bars. So it feels like there's all these little emergent ways to support each other. No matter what build you're on, you can kind of contribute in different ways, and it's like you do feel really good, like you actively saved this person that would have just been gone otherwise. So that's the good. Now let's talk about the bad, or even downright ugly in my opinion, because I think they've made some missteps here. And it's because I believe ArenaNet made a fundamental error in what they did to this fight, in how they tuned it. They're publicly on the record at the moment, there's a forum post, saying that they wanted this thing to be the ultimate epic conclusion to the Guild Wars 2 story so far. And it is, in terms of the visuals and all that other stuff I talked about. But the other thing they went on top of that is they actually made it challenging as well. Like, this is a really difficult meta event. I would compare this, not as hard as Triple Trouble launch, not as hard as To Quarter Rework launch, but probably around launch Heart of Thorns Chuck Gerrant. Which, if you guys remember, there was a patch very quickly that addressed that with the Chuck Gerrant, and rightly so. But if you remember, right at the start, if you beat Heart of Thorns, you flew through it, you basically had very little to do, but there was the Chuck Gerrant, and you could grind against that. I myself did a bunch of streams playing it. And, you know, I kind of look back fondly on that, but the Chuck Gerrant was very much like an optional part of the game. This is like mainline, like the thing that people are playing the expansion to do, and they're being pushed into this very, very challengingly tuned thing, which means that most groups, as far as I can see, that are actually getting the kills are super organized, in Discords, kill-proof requiring groups, and the vast majority of the rest of the community is not getting to experience the thrill of this fight at this point. So there's a lot to talk about here, and I do think it's a mistake. All right, let me be very clear. I think they made a mistake. I actually think this is really stupid what they've done here. You've heard me say this before, countless times on this series before I knew anything about this meta, and I'll say it again. A good meta in Guild Wars is a layered meta with lots to see, lots to do, which is valid gameplay. You know, there's a variety of activities to participate in and kinds of combat to participate in that all builds to a greater whole where there's a lot of spectacle. Events like Terrir are not hard, but they are filled with so many interesting moving parts. That makes them a great meta with the visuals and so on top. Terrir does not need to be hard. Meta events that turn hard run into all these fundamental problems. Hard work content in the open world just doesn't work. I'm someone who played and grinded basically all the difficult open world content that Guild Wars has ever had to offer, and at the time I've loved that content. But those were previous eras of the game where there were less formats available. Lessons have been learned, right? If you want to do hard content, you don't do it in an environment where players have minimal control over who they're doing that content with. Sure, let's assume I'm one of those players that is happy and comfortable enough to get into a squad or even run a squad, which I am, to do this event. An already minority proportion of the player base, but let's gloss over that. Well, fine, but what about all the other random people that are fishing in the north of the map and I have no control or right to kick out? So half of my squad is stuck outside of the map, playing this obnoxious game of right-clicking on a member in the squad, trying to join and getting an error message, and then being incentivized to run macros so that they don't have to manually do it. That's not the kind of player behavior or loop that people should be getting pushed into. asking average players to organise 50 or more people. Now look, I appreciate the guild building elements of that and the social sides of that, believe me I do, but this is just way out of the control of most individuals that are out there playing the game. 50 people, and it's not that you actually need super perfect compositions, but at least 50 people who have previous experience with the meta and are actually really in the know about exactly where to go and what to do. ArenaNet are on the record publicly as stating that they think the community over time will build an understanding of how this thing works, and the completion rates will go up, and that they're seeing that. And while I think that's true, I think that only works for the short term. What about like 3-4 years down the line where this starts to fall apart again because people have started to forget this information and the content ends up essentially dead? And look at all the complications that come in from having 60 players, with the vast difference in competence of play that this community has, but other tangibles people can't even control, like the difference in ping amounts that players have and what telegraphs some people can easily avoid, others can't, or their frame rates and culling stuff, which I mentioned before, is especially prominent and stressed out in open world meta events. This is just not smart, and the studio learned that it's not smart to do hard content in metas, that hard content thrives at smaller scales, years ago. That's why right after the Triple Trouble Worm experiment, which again for the time was fun and a fascinating and brilliant thing that I will cherish, Heart of Thorns dropped the concept in general. They nerfed the Chuck Garant pretty quickly because they had given us raids where we could indulge in this stuff. All of these problems I just mentioned go away at the 10-man scale, where you can spin up your own instance and your own timing. In the open world, when you're stuck on a meta event timer, even if this meta is a bit shorter, there's still an incredibly frustrating, lame feeling of like, okay, we tried it once, we have these 50 people who maybe will do better the next time, but sorry, the next meta isn't for another hour now. 50% of your people now have to go to work or whatever, so the next time you do it, you're gonna have a bunch of fresh blood and you're gonna have to train all of them up again. And an individual's control to actually be able to beat this, even if they feel like they did everything well, they played perfectly in the thing, is super diminished. And the specific mechanics going on in this meta, some of them don't help either. So there is a phase in this meta. It's essentially like a jumping puzzle phase, and it's really gorgeous and beautiful, and I love the idea of it. But everyone has to participate in it, essentially. And in this phase, a single player, and I really do mean this, one person out of the entire group, at multiple occasions over the event, can choose if they like, either it could be an act of ignorance, stupidity, or actively troll. One person can wipe the entire group. That level of personal responsibility on a meta event with this number of players, and you can't even fully control everyone you've got there unless you like super try hard and spin up a map earlier and ask for like really heavy time investments from the players. That would be an hour of gameplay down the drain because of one person's unfortunate ignorance or active trolliness. And it's not just about a certain mechanic where everyone has to stand in a green circle, and if someone chooses to step out, everyone wipes. The jumping puzzle phase as well, you know, when I learned how that worked, I did it like very quick. I did it in a matter of seconds. And, you know, I think I got an achievement for getting up really quickly or something. And then I was standing around in the meta event waiting for a phase to go through so we could get back to hitting the boss. And it just wasn't happening because clearly some poor bastard who's much newer at the game or, you know, learns things much slower is holding literally everyone else up because they're taking ages to climb up and do this mechanic, and the entire meta event is tuned so tightly that that has serious ramifications for everyone else. So again, it's this thing of like personal responsibility in a format where it is just the worst thing to put out there. I think personal responsibility is really good when we're in fractals, when we're in strikes, when we're in raids, not out here. Another incredibly depressing thing that I've heard from multiple sources, I don't know whether I've fully seen it for myself just yet, but is that there's actually RNG counting here. The order that the boss does different animations and telegraphs is up to chance. So if it spams too much of a certain animation that really lowers the amount of time you can do damage, you're going to run out of time for the meta. Meanwhile, some other groups that play it much less competently might breathe through fine. And now what are we in a position? Take a random, not too invested Guild Wars player. If they want to see the end of this thing, then they're going to have to just hope. They're going to fail the event and they're going to wait for an hour in the hope that maybe they'll get a better roll next time. Again, I haven't fully verified the RNG stuff, so comments about that I would really like to hear below. There's the break bar as well, which I mentioned, there's lots of them and I really like, but I'm beginning to wonder about the break bars here, and wondering whether it's better to slow burn them or something. This was an exact problem we had years ago in Heart of Thorns. Slow burning should not be a thing in Guild Wars, and they still haven't resolved the slow burn issue back there, so why wouldn't it be a problem here too? And in a horrible twist of things, that would be the groups that are even better at slamming the break bars down actually have less damage uptime at that point, and that would be even worse. Lastly, and isn't this just the cherry on the sundae, it's a hard enrage. The meta doesn't even end in a satisfying way, it's just a straight up time limit. And even if you're playing really well and the boss isn't actually able to beat you or whatever, you run out of time, that's it, you're just out. No questions asked. ArenaNet learned the hard enrages suck ages ago. They usually opt for soft enrages, and when it is a hard enrage, a hard kick out, they usually do it in some clever way, like you've been losing territory throughout the course of the fight, and so now you're actually out of space. But no, this thing just unceremoniously says, whatever, we've run out of time, that's it, it's done. They could have at least done a soft enrage, have a little bit of flexibility there, but they chose not to. And I think it comes back to this fundamental, absurd idea that difficult stuff in the open world is appropriate. And they didn't want people fudging this experience in any way at all. That's also why the majority of the patches since launch have been about addressing people skipping mechanics. So, again, I do want to say, I get the adrenaline and the joy behind having a real challenge in Guild Wars. I'm all for that stuff. I will play all of that stuff as it comes in and have fun with it. I was feeling that sort of joy of the uncertainty of whether we'd beat it as I was playing earlier. I actually got quite a bit of adrenaline. It was fun. And by and large, I don't love easy metas, okay? I don't really like loot pinatas. I don't spend that much time doing that in Guild Wars. They're not my jam. What I'm saying is that the game has better places for this experience. This is unnecessarily muddying the waters and messing with what content exists for what audiences and what expectations we should have. And I'm not one of these people that's just mad because I want the reward and the mount progression, which unfortunately seems to be what most people who have a problem with the meta are talking about. That it's just because they want the siege turtle or whatever right now. If you want a TLDR from me to put a cap on this, here's what I would say. There are too many logistical impediments that come from trying to do difficult content with over 20 people, right? 20 is probably the cutoff. Here we're looking at 60, and in the past we were looking at over hundreds. There are too many arbitrary, frustrating, technical, logistical issues from content at this player number to make doing it difficult at all satisfying. The experience should be in Guild Wars. It should be done in the strike mission, the fractal, or the raid format, not here. What really fascinates me at this point is that the fourth and final strike mission is right here after this meta. If I go in and one-shot the 10-man version, or even if I get this in just like a couple of attempts, the 10-man version of whatever that final strike mission is, I think my head is going to explode. So, those are my thoughts and feelings on the fourth and final map. Overall, I had a great day. And though the back half of the discussion in this video has been kind of negative about what I view as a very bizarre direction for them to have taken in, I'm still feeling overall really, really satisfied with all this stuff. I mean, the meta is awesome. Let me return to that comment. I think it's the best meta they've ever done, just in terms of everything that's happening here. I'm also not really married to any of these opinions. This is sort of a, first impression style review. So let me know what you think, guys. Feel free to spend some time over this weekend to catch up on my Let's Play episodes before the big finale happens and we conclude the story. And Christ, who knows what the reviews will look like after that. Cheers, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.